This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. This is October, so every review I'm going to do for this month is going to be a horror movie. Something new, something old, all horror. Which I frankly don't need an excuse to do anyway, because I love horror. What I'm looking at today is a movie that just turned up on Netflix called House of the Witch. This is a movie that started so promisingly, implying that what follows is not so promising, which it is. But I'll get to that in a moment. It started so promisingly, and well, in the beginning you have, I believe it's 3 characters who are, one's trying to convince the other to go to this creepy mansion in their town where supposedly a witch had died and this type of thing. And the atmosphere generated by this opening is so good. It has you expecting something more. It's very Stephen King-ish almost, combined with a little Steven Spielberg even. It's a really great opening. But unfortunately, the movie falls apart after the opening. And the thing is, there's some oddities you'll see in this movie. But if it had stayed faithful to that opening, it wouldn't really matter, frankly. So in any case, one of these people goes to this house where the witch was said to live, and he vanishes. The effect isn't that great, but it's not terrible either. And so, cut to maybe, I believe it's 5 to 7 years later, a bunch of other people are going to that house, and bad things ensue. As I said, this is where the movie goes to crap, in the sense that it's well acted. Well, I should say it's not badly acted. Some of the actors are better than others, but it's not terrible by any stretch. The problem is, nothing makes sense in the way the movie works. And as I said earlier, in a better movie, you probably would let it go. In a movie like this, every little fault is in glaring relief, and that's a problem. For instance, this house has supposedly been, I wouldn't say condemned, but it's nonetheless cordoned off, and people aren't supposed to go to it. Now, that's not something that would stop any young person who is curious enough to do it. But the thing is, the gate to this place is opened. Put a lock on it. And now, keep in mind, we're talking about something supernatural. That lock could be opened at certain times. But put a lock on the gate. Make it seem as if it were forbidden, which it's supposed to be. Another thing, as I mentioned earlier, this house was supposedly owned by a person who was a witch. And once they enter the house, I think it's 4 or 5 people, not really characters per se than the Scooby Gang, except less competent. Bad things start to happen to them. But you don't know why what happens happens, for the most part. Weirdness just ensues, but it's a weirdness without a point. It's a weirdness for the sake of weirdness. And that's not very good, because, at least for me, I wasn't understanding quite why anything was actually happening. Sure, there's a witch, I get it, but why is she doing this instead of that? Why is this happening instead of that happening? There's no rhyme or reason to it, and that is very frustrating to watch. Now, I mentioned the cast and referred to them as a Scooby Gang, except less confident. And they do things which are nonsensical. For instance, they split up more often than they should. Now, keep in mind, they're in a mansion with a hostile spirit that they're well aware of at this point. And they decide to split up for reasons of movie. And it's the dumbest thing. Why are you doing that? And I mentioned things happening without rhyme or reason. One of the characters develops kind of boils and stuff on his face. Why? What does it have to do with anything? He was cut on his shoulder earlier. What that has to do with the boils on his face, I have no idea. And his condition progressively worsened as the movie went on. But I didn't know why this was happening in the first place. there was a scene where another character touches a mirror and kind of goes into it, her hand, I should say, kind of goes into it, and it's essentially severed. But why? What is the point of that? It's an interesting visual. Well, there wasn't much of a scene, frankly, in terms of visual or gore, but it just had no reason to be. And that's the biggest problem with this movie. After that great opening, and it is a fantastic opening, nothing makes sense. Nothing is cohesive. Things seem to happen because movie, and that's it. And one thing that bears mentioning, one of the characters, I don't know if this was a homage or what, but quotes the character no, it's not Hicks. The guy from Alien, played by Bill Paxton, who was incredible in that movie, but that's neither here nor there. He quotes him. His famous line, "You know what it is."
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
And I'm like, oh my God, did you just do that? Again, if this were a better movie, that would go over better. And also if the guy was a better actor too. I don't think he was actually well suited for the role. But in any case, if he were a better actor, that would have been excusable. If the movie were a better movie, that would have been excusable. As it stands, it's just like, oh my God, they just did that. They did that. This is not a terrible movie. And I hope I didn't give the impression that it is terrible. It's not very good though. It actually looks good. The cinematography is fine. In fact, better than most movies of relatively low budget, I would honestly say. It looks good. It's, for the most part, well acted. But the story lets it down. This story is gibberish. This may have made sense on the page, but I don't know if it was a disconnect between the director and the writers or what, but nothing makes any sense. Nothing is cohesive, because which is not a reason why random events should be happening. As much as I crap on the original Blair Witch, namely that as a movie, it's not very good, and it's more of an experience to be had once. Any more than that, it's just kind of irritating. At least that movie was consistent. You understood why things were happening. Now, as I said, I was not a fan of the original Blair Witch, but at the same time, I got it. This movie is just weird, random things happening for no point because witch. So it's not a great movie, but that's the most frustrating thing about House of the Witch. It had so much potential, and that is just so irksome to me. I've seen terrible movies and enjoyed, frankly. But with House of the Witch, it started off so strong and just goes downhill so relatively quickly. And it's a pity, and it's all in the writing. It's competently directed. The cinematography is good. It's not a bad-looking movie by any stretch, and it's not terrible. It is watchable. But that opening is the problem, in a sense. The opening is, I think, great. It sets you up for something that is so disappointing. House of the Witch is on Netflix. Check it out. Let me know what you think. And if you like this video, please give me a like, or even consider following Screen Files. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review.